want to talk about being an immigrant and trying to learn the language in a new country versus someone who's studying a different language living in their home country. So when you are in your home country and you go to language classes, you only have to practice in a safe environment with the other pupils that know the exact same vocabulary you've learned. They pretty much have used the same book. Maybe, you rotate over time and you have some different people, so they might know a few different things than you, but for the most part, you have this sort of common vocabulary, your common level, and it's a safe space. And you can practice, you can try things out, and you can laugh at each other. You all have bad pronunciation. Some are better than others, but it's kind of easier. So now take the immigrant experience. You're thrown into having to work or, for me, I got pregnant like 5 months after I moved to a new country. So I was working and pregnant, needing to rest, and then of course thrown into babyland. And I did take classes through some. It was actually easier in the very infant stage because I could sometimes be breastfeeding and reading a book or listening or whatever. As my child got older, it was much more difficult to interact and get to classes and do things. So now I'm kind of working on my own. But the difference in the experience when I'm learning new words and I'm interacting in Swedish, I'm in these super important situations. I'm trying to advocate for my special needs kid at a school with a second language, and then things go away. I get nervous and I get stressed, and then I can't remember the words that I knew, and it all goes out the window. Sensory overload, I can attribute it to myself. And then, but it's so frustrating because I have people who are like, oh, the reason why you don't speak more Swedish is because you've just, everyone speaks English and so you don't have a chance to practice. And I'm like, no, that's not true at all. It goes from people who speak fluent English, speak to me, and I'm feeling pretty good, and then I can throw in my one Swedish phrase and we're all good, to going to social situations where no one speaks a word of English and they completely leave me out and I have no idea what's going on, and I totally tune it out and I just shut down. And I have multiple situations like that my first year in the country. So I learned really basics, and I do like this listening program and did that before I came. So I knew really basic, like hello, thank you, goodbye, really basic stuff. But even some of the stuff, like I'd like a cup of coffee at a restaurant, or, learning to order a sandwich, some of it I could not get the words down. I would listen to it and go, yeah. And then trying to say it was impossible. So I don't know why, but it stuck in my tongue more than, say, learning French or Spanish. For me, when I was in the US, it felt easier. I've now since thought about it and think that part of it was the fact that I was in this safe classroom environment. I had the group of cohort and I could say silly things, and I wasn't going to get the wrong food if I said the wrong thing. I wasn't going to mess up my child's education or have the teacher mad at me if I said the wrong thing. So I feel like being an immigrant, you're under pressure. It's like having a super high pressure test every single day. And the slower you are to access the language classes or however you learn, the longer time it takes you, the more agonizing the process. So it's not to judge anyone. It's like your life circumstances are what they are, and sometimes you're able to take classes and sometimes you're not. Sometimes you have the money for them, sometimes you don't. And I would say I often in the US with my teaching saw many parents where the dad became completely fluent in English because he's out and he's working and he's interacting, and so he's picking up the language, and then getting fluent, or maybe he took classes before they moved already and he already knew it. But so many times I saw the mothers struggling much more with the language, and often just trying to find their community of other people that spoke the same language. And people would criticize them, like, why are you only hanging out with the Korean mothers? Why don't you hang out with the other English speakers? And I understand. It's, you want to feel, there's this feeling of home when you are surrounded by a sea of a language that you don't speak fluently, and then you hear your language, your mother tongue. There's this just like cozy feeling about it, and you just feel safe. And so I can see wanting to get together with others and just speak freely, because I think the other thing I realize now, kind of realizing I'm ADHD autistic myself, with my child's diagnosis, I start to see all those things in me, and I realize that one of my issues now that I can carry on a basic conversation or things, mostly know what's going on at a school meeting, interact with officials when I need to, or the doctor visit, and do a lot of that in Swedish, although I still revert to English if I can. If the other person speaks enough English, I tend to still default to English because I'm worried I'm going to miss something super important for my health or my kid or whatever. But when I need to, when someone doesn't speak English and I need to work in Swedish, I'm getting to the point where it's getting much better, and I can understand, and I can speak, and I can get my point across, and I can talk to my husband's parents and have a full conversation. I feel like, yay. But I still feel like, oh my gosh, I should be so much farther ahead. But what I need to learn is a systematic method and step-by-step instructions. And I really don't pick up that much from just listening to everybody. I pretty much just shut down. When I was a beginner, I was just getting overloaded and I didn't hear any of it. As I learn more, I feel like now I have the capacity to pick up a few words in context. Now, I will say it's in a social context that's much easier. If I'm in a high pressure situation, such as a school meeting or whatever, I'm not going to learn new words right then. It's more like a freeze up because I'm like, oh no, what are they saying? So I guess I wish more schools, when they're dealing with immigrant parents, could maybe prioritize having some translation. If you have a big community with a certain language and you have somebody at the school who speaks that language well, or mostly, to have some availability to have interpreters and to really prioritize trying to make sure that the parents feel safe enough to really help the teachers and the school educate their kids in a good way. I really feel like when we can all be a community and we can help the interactions, it's just going to go better for all of our kids. So I just wanted you to be aware and sensitive and looking out for the immigrants' parents in your community. Like, I would find helpful for someone to even summarize and take from like a meeting and say, these were the most important things, and be able to share that. And I could Google Translate or something. I just think, making it more inclusive. And if you have to deal with school absences or special needs children like mine, just be extra sensitive. Just be aware there's going to be times where you don't understand each other. You don't understand their accent and they don't understand yours. And even like, I'm able to access these kind of meetings in English, in my native language, but I still understand that some of the people at the table, they're not fluent in English. They're mostly, but there's going to be misunderstandings, not just for the language, but also for culture. What is expected from me from school in the US is different than what's expected in Sweden. And even though I've taught at one school in Sweden, it was an international school, so it's not the same as the public kind of generic Swedish schools. And I don't always know what are the traditions, what are the things, what are the expectations. There was just constantly the feeling of, oh, there's a holiday tradition that I wasn't aware of. I didn't know because I didn't grow up here. And even my husband, you think, okay, he's a Swede. We're not like two immigrant parents here. But in his mind is obvious because he grew up with it. And so, of course, everyone would know that that was something that happens at school, but also because he's not the one taking care of the child, he wouldn't think ahead, like, okay, this thing's coming up. Most kids usually dress up. We might need an outfit. So he wouldn't think to then tell me, okay, 3 weeks before, let's think about this. What do we need? Ultimately, the kids are the ones that look weird at school and feel bad when everyone else is in a costume. They didn't even know it was an option. Or, yeah, I mean, that happened multiple years with Lucia in Sweden. There's this tradition around December, and I still can't tell you what date it is. I think it's the 13th. I'm not sure. But my first couple years of schooling with my child, it was like, I dropped my kid off for preschool and everyone else has these little outfits on with little gingerbread outfits and Santa outfits, or Lucy, they're dressed up as Lucia. Who is Lucia? I didn't know about Lucia. So anyway, I think just being able to have someone articulate and kind of say, oh, these are traditions that we do. Or as a teacher, I would have loved to have someone like a month ahead say, hey, just so you know, we have this Lucia Day. Kids sometimes dress up like this. You don't have to, but if you want to, your kid can. Because they communicated that there was Lucia and that they were singing songs for it, but I didn't know that people dress up. I didn't know what the traditions were. It wasn't made explicit for me. So I think, yeah, again, just be aware and try to think outside of your norms and what is normal for you and your traditions, the way you do things, and try to be really clear with the parents about this is what we need, these are the things that we expect, and with heads up possibly, because also with like clothing things, I almost always buy secondhand because that's what we can afford. And so for me to get something, sometimes I need like 2 to 3 months notice because I might need to check somewhere different and look around more, and I'm not just going to order the next thing online. So it might take more time. So yeah, just kind of trying to be aware, be kind, help each other out, and we're all going to do better in school, between school and home.